Hey, it's Interstates. I'm Alex Chambers. So before we start, I wanted to let you know about three live events that I'll be doing in conjunction with the show in the next month or so. First, next week, Thursday the 13th, it's WFIU's monthly trivia night. I'll be hosting. Come for the trivia, stay for the answers to the questions. That's at 8:30 at the Vaults at the Indiana University Memorial Union. It'll be fun. And then there's how to preserve an orange. So there's been a lot of discussion lately about how screens and social media are messing with our attention. This will be a chance to pay close attention to an orange. It's a sort of experiential performance led by poet and intermedia artist Clay Schofield. My colleague, Earth Eats host Kate Young, was at the first performance last spring, and she said it was great. That's on Tuesday, February 25th at 7 p.m. at Red Bud Books in downtown Bloomington. And then Thursday, March 6th, I'll be interviewing not one, not two, but three people live at the Grunwald Gallery on the IU campus. You can listen and doodle on film as you do. More about that as we get closer. We'll also have more info about all the events in our social media feeds. Okay, to the episode. The other day, I went to check in on my 10-year-old during her screen time. She was playing Goat Simulator on her Switch. She was also watching Gravity Falls on her iPad. Other times, she just watches people play video games. I get it. It's my role to not understand my kids' media habits. And as a parent, it's also my job to worry about my kids' screen time. Maybe you're a parent who doesn't worry. Maybe you're at one end of the spectrum or the other, like, have at it, kids, or you set limits with the iron fist of nurturing boundaries. But most of us, I think, can't help but worry about what it does to their attention spans to be streaming TV while playing a video game. My 10-year-old does have limits on screens. For my teenager, the limits eroded over the years. I really don't know how much to worry about it. I want them to get outside, talk to real people, look at the sky, touch trees, experience the wonder and the boredom of the analog world. But I'm not trying to be a Luddite. Sure, I personally have never been that into video games, but I realize they can offer rich, complex narrative experiences. And, like fun. I guess people like that too. There might even be things that video games offer that are just too hard to find in the contemporary world otherwise. Like, I don't know, the adrenaline rush of being chased by a wild boar. Quests to find treasure, even if in reality it was about finding potable water. Or to prove yourself to a community. I'm trying to acknowledge the value of video games, but I guess I'm still a little skeptical about their importance for humanity. And yes, I do realize I'm saying all this on a podcast. Side note, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word podcast first appeared in English in 2004, decades after video games. I just want my kids to spend more time outside. Anyway. In the midst of all this, I heard about someone who's working on video games to support girls. It's great. And she's also working on video games for another group that hasn't traditionally had games made for them. Can you just start by introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Patricia Pizer. I am a professor of practice. I need some more plosives here.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Which means that I came out of the game industry for 36 years, and now I get to teach students, which is awesome, and I'm really excited about it.
Patricia teaches at the Indiana University Media School. As you heard, she was in the gaming industry for 36 years. And there's this other aspect of her life that's been going on for almost as long. Can you tell me about when you first met Buster Keaton?
Yes, I can. He was the most ugly cute thing you've ever come across. I mean, like, on one hand, so Goonie looking, like giant eyes, a giant beak, and feet. And the rest was kind of like a bag of feathers, sort of growing in. And I don't know, he looked at me with that, will you be my mommy look? And I was like, yes, I will.
In light of my gentle skepticism about whether video games are good for humanity, when I heard that Patricia was developing games for parrots, that's parrots, the birds, not parents, the skeptics, my skepticism got a little less gentle. Are we really going to get animals hooked too? Apparently I'm not the only one with doubts. This is from a video on the Parrot Concepts website. That's the company Patricia started with her collaborator, Virginia Wright.
Between the two of us, we're bringing many decades of experience to handling this.
Here, Patricia pauses. She looks up at the ceiling. It seems like she's feeling a little awkward. Finally, she shrugs and presses onward to say, this
problem. I call it a problem. I think it's a problem.
She will then go on to make the case that you should contribute to the Patreon to support them in addressing this problem. I gotta say, by the end of our conversation, she had me convinced. There's a real problem, and video games for parrots are gonna help. We're gonna take a break, and then we'll hear about Buster Keaton growing up and how everyone in this story got into video games. Support for Interstates comes from Columbus Area Visitor Center, celebrating everywhere art and unexpected architecture in Columbus, Indiana. Tickets for guided architecture tours and more at columbus.in.us.
I had a cockatiel, and the cockatiel had gotten out and vanished. So a few months went by, and I really wanted to have a companion animal in my house.
And this is at what stage of your life?
I was 29. So the apartment I was living in, I couldn't have a dog. I'm allergic to cats. So I'd been familiar with birds, and so that's why I got the cockatiel in the first place. I was looking for like a mid-sized bird, something like not too challenging. And then I met Buster.
He was 6 months old.
He was 6 weeks old.
Weeks?
Yeah.
6 weeks old.
Yeah, which is why he was so goony. Because it's like, yeah, you're just starting to turn into a real thing. I found a book, because there was no internet. I found a book, like the kind that they have in pet shops that tell you about different breeds. Like, this is what Maltese Terriers are like. Well, this was one book on cockatoos, and it had one page per cockatoo, and there were like 20 different varieties. And it would have a picture of one and verbiage on the other side telling you what they're like. And of course, there wasn't really that much known about them at the time. So I was like, oh, well, they originate in the Tanimbar Islands and in the Indonesian archipelago, and, they like these things. And then they were described as being mischievous clowns. Yeah, that is code for a total pain in the butt.
Right.
Because they're so damn smart.
And was this Goffins in particular or cockatoos in general?
Yeah, this is Goffin's cockatoo.
Yeah.
There are the two top avian institutes in the world are using Goffins now to be studying avian intelligence.
Oh, very interesting.
One uses them exclusively.
Wow.
And that sprang out of captive Goffins at a zoo. There was a nut out on the shelf, and he fashioned a rake to pull the nut in so he could get it. So this is a little different than a chimpanzee taking a blade of grass and sticking it into an anthill. I mean, I understand, yes, that is also tool making, but this is fashioning a tool
this is construction.
to a specific task, which that's kind of next level. Of course, the first question everybody asks me when they hear I have a parrot is, does it talk? Like, yeah. So his talking is not what makes him so interesting to me. Goffin's cockatoos are not linguistically talented. They have about 15 things that they say overall, that they just don't have a huge vocabulary. And you can never choose what it is they're going to learn.
Right.
That they choose what they want. So I'd met him, and I was like,
okay,
do I want to get him? And I'm like trying to learn about it. And it's like, okay, but mischievous clown sounds charming and wonderful and fun. And what it really means is a maniacal toddler with a box cutter and a foghorn.
Right. That sounds not fun.
People often ask me, they're like, so do you like your parrot? If you've had a relationship with anybody for 30 years, yeah, you might love them dearly, but you also have moments when you want to strangle them because they are driving you bananas.
Yeah, seriously.
He had to stay at the pet shop for a while to get weaned.
Okay.
So I would go to the pet shop for literally 2 to 3 hours every day. And when I finally got him home, honestly, I was used to having dogs. I had a lot more experience with dogs. So one of the first things I did was play tug of war with him. I handed him something. And he did it for, 5 seconds. And then he pulled it, grabbed it with his foot, and bit my hand to make me let go. He was very gymnastic. He would walk upside down on the roof of his cage, and things like that, which is part of the reason he's named Buster Keaton.
Okay. Because
Buster Keaton did all his own stunts. And I certainly was not spending the next 30 or 40 years with Jackie Chan or Tom Cruise. People always say, having a dog is pet, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, it is not like having a pet. Because he talks to me in English, right?
What does he say?
So he says, hi, Birdie, which is like our greeting.
Sure.
He'll tell me that he wants a bath.
Really?
I want a bath.
So it's not like having a dog because he talks in English and
you do not have a relationship with a dog for that long. I mean,
True.
If you get 20 years out of a dog, that's like a miracle. Right. So you're cycling through. This is much more like having a relationship with another person, especially as he shares my home. Mm-hmm. He has been there for a very long time with me. He will not do things he is not in the mood to do. Like a dog will pretty much cooperate with almost anything you're doing to him and always be happy to see you. Yeah, not with parrots. Not with parrots. I had to see an avian behaviorist a couple of years ago because he was getting too feisty during mating season. Female cockatoos are frequently wounded in mating season. They just get very aggressive. So he was trashing my hands, and my business partner set it up that I could have this webinar with her and then 2 private sessions with her. And I had to change some things about our relationship because nobody told me, oh, if you do this, it's encouraging their mating behaviors. It's like, okay, so we had to renegotiate everything,
new habits,
which he was not happy about. Like any dysfunctional relationship, when one of you decides, we got to change this, the other one's never happy about it. So I now when I go to pick him up, he frequently makes me say, please. I'll say, okay, step up. And he'll just look at me and back up a little bit. Like, please step up. When he's really cantankerous, it's like, please step up.
So the animal thing has been, and birds in particular, has been one long strand in your life. And then there's this other one that also started, I think, when you were a kid.
Yes. I lucked into being a video game designer, but my family always played games when I was a kid, card games, board games, as long as I can remember. And then I was just out of graduate school and I had a job that I hated.
Well, wait, I think I heard you say on a different podcast, something happened when you were a teenager.
Yes, when I was
an early teenager.
Yeah, when I was 12. Yeah. I was staying with my best friend. We were actually staying at her sister's house. Her sister worked at Bank of America, and she needed us to be entertained because she had to do something that was going to take a few hours. So she called one of the computer guys over and said, oh, can you set them up with something to do? And it was just after Adventure / Colossal Cave, depending on where you go. It's called different things, which was the first text adventure. And he set us up with this.
On a computer.
And I mean, it was a terminal because it was a mainframe computer. And only people in, banking and big insurance companies and places like that had access to it right away because it was released for mainframes. And as we were playing it, I was like, oh, this is what computers are for. It's telling stories. I suddenly understood it as a medium for information or story being shared.
So you realize computers can be for telling stories and also for playing games kind of simultaneously. And then did you continue to think of that, or was then there another moment later?
So when I was in college, I had a group of friends who liked to game together. We played D&D together. And computer games also kind of came in. My boyfriend at the time, he had a couple of Apple computers, and then he got one of the first Macintosh computers. And we would be all packed around this one little screen, and one of us would be typing, and we were solving these text adventures. And they were absolutely fabulous, and the company that made them is Infocom, who's famous for Zork, among other things. A few out there titles like Leather Goddesses of Phobos, which actually sold very well. And they also did the computer game for Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, nice.
So,
and these were all text-based?
Yes.
Okay.
Completely. They garnered a spot in my heart with their work as being really, really stellar. So I wanted to be a writer, and my mother convinced me that if I was a writer, I'd end up starving in a garret in Paris, which honestly does not sound like a bad thing. But she convinced me to go into PR because if you're in PR, you always have work.
Yeah, true.
So I finished. Took a gap year to pay for my own schooling, and I went to the only public relations master's program in the country at the time, which was at Emerson College, advertising and PR. And one semester in, I was like, oh, you guys are salesmen with good vocabularies. That is not what I wanted to be doing. That's no. So when I finished,
they sold it to your mom and to you, I guess.
Well, my mom was a very 70s feminist and like very practical about things.
That makes sense.
You know, I was wearing suits when I was like 18 because that was just the trajectory that was planned for me.
Yeah, right.
So, then I thought, well, okay, but I am getting a full fellowship. So this is all paid for, kinda. And it's like, well, I will finish this out. It's only 2 more semesters, and then I have a master's degree. And whether it's something that I really want or not, at this point, I'm just going to take it. So when I graduated, I took a job at a desktop publishing firm. So back before people had their own computers all the time and printers and other expensive things, you could rent out time at a place that was like a library of computers, and you could print your papers and so on. We were in Harvard Square. So yes, there were a lot of people with last minute papers that had to be done. I had joined the company to be doing graphic layout because that was part of my master's program. But because I knew much more about the computers than anyone else who worked there, I ended up in the self-service area the whole time, like incessantly. It was like, yeah, I don't like this. This is not, no.
Just doing IT.
Well, yeah. And I mean, it wasn't creatively satisfying in the least. And obviously I wanted to be doing something creative. Right. So a customer came in one day to have some linotronic typesetting done. So this was for a magazine ad. So it had to be like really high end. And I'm talking to him, and what do you know? He works for Infocom, which I did not know was in Cambridge, just like I was. And so, we started talking. Of course, I went fangirl on him, like, oh, I played all your games, blah, blah, blah. So I saw him a couple more times, and he called my office one day, and he said, you're not very happy with that job, are you? I said, no, because it's McDonald's with toner cartridges. Like, this is dreadful. And he said, well, we have an opening for a tester, and I think you'd be great at it. That was on Thursday. I started on Tuesday.
Amazing.
I was like, I do not owe you like any 2 weeks notice for because you did not give me what we contracted for me to be doing. So anyway, see ya. Because it was the same money that I was making, and I would get to be one of the first people playing my favorite games in the world. So like,
of course, it's amazing.
Exactly, no brainer. Like, and I really think about like an actress being discovered at some restaurant kind of thing. It's just like...
That's really how it felt.
Yeah. And I was thrilled. It never occurred to me that game designer was a job title.
Yeah.
But not from what I'd seen yet. I mean, it was still pretty nascent. So, yeah.
And this was around when?
This was 1988. it was pretty thrilling to get to do that. And I very quickly became pretty adept at what my general tasks were. But like one of the reasons that InfoCon did so much testing, aside from wanting to have games as bug-free as possible, there was also a situation where if you were in the testing department and you were reasonably sharp, you would end up suggesting things like, oh, well, I had this thing and this thing, and if I put them together, something interesting should happen. They're called interesting fail states. So yes, you failed in what you were trying to do, but it's still fun and playful. So I was constantly suggesting those, and then I ended up writing online hints for the company. And I just never looked back.
So you've really been involved since pretty much the beginning.
Yeah.
In the whole game industry.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah, there are a few other women who have been in the industry this long. I can fit them all around my dining table.
So that actually was another thing I was curious about, was the very few women, what that was like. You know, one of the games that you listed seemed like it, even though it was all text-based, it seemed like it was still embodying the male gaze. The
leather goddesses. Okay, actually, there's something really wonderful about that game, which is that it was set up it came with a scratch and sniff card, which was fabulous. So it was their copy control, because if you couldn't identify a smell, you couldn't proceed. It was a lockout point.
Amazing.
So you're in a pizza place, and it says you feel an urge, and if you head toward the restrooms, there's men's room and ladies' room. Again, this is all text, and because I had been playing games all this time, I went through the men's room door because, of course, that's the one you should be using. But that's not how it worked. It determined by the door that you chose how your adventure went. So if you chose the men's room, you had this hot, busty woman as your sidekick, and ended up in like a harem and so on and so forth. If you took the women's door, on the other hand, you had a hunky guy as your sidekick, and so on and so forth. And honestly, it made me kind of mad later when I discovered this, because it was like, the situation had so trained me to not even question how that worked. I mean, like Leisure Suit Larry, for instance. I mean, all of the characters that you're playing, they were all men.
Yes.
Always.
Of course.
Which, of course, is why they made this game, was to break that rule.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
Yeah, it really was. And it's a great dynamic. I mean, because a player has a meaningful choice,
right? But
it's one they're not really thinking about, because it seems self-evident.
So even back then, people were occasionally thinking that these games might be played by people other than boys or men.
Eventually,
straight boys and men.
Yeah, white males age 35 or 20, right. 18 to 35.
18 to 35.
That's your hardcore demographic.
Right, that makes sense. So, and you were a woman working in this industry. What was that like?
Many days it was really hard.
Yeah.
Infocom was not bad, because even though there weren't any female implementers, game designers, there had been one. She was actually a fellow alum of mine, and she made the first romance game. It was like a bodice ripper text adventure, which I think is fabulous. There were a lot of other women working in the company, and the head of QA was a woman. So like I didn't really become aware of it for a bit. And my second company was also, it was started by two of the Infocom folks that I had worked with. And it was pretty egalitarian. But then, you get into a company where it's 32 guys and me. And that is a very different thing.
Yeah.
The other thing was, every time I'd start a new job, and in games you do that relatively often because companies go under all the time, or they have layoffs, et cetera, so there is a fairly high turnover rate. Every time I took a new job, at the end of my first day, I would have to play whatever first-person shooter, shoot 'em up battle game that they were playing and prove that I could kill them. Now, let me just say, killing someone as a way of introduction is not my idea of how things are done. But it was a culture thing. And the thing was that I had to prove that I was a gamer, which F you, man. Like, if I got the job, I must have been able to at least fake it long enough to get through that.
But like for a certain period, the first-person shooter was like the default game. This is the only thing that counts as a legitimate game.
Yes, absolutely. Which is really unfortunate because it led to the dying off of a lot of other genres.
Oh, interesting.
Because they couldn't survive in that kind of market. Well, and at that time, the industry being what it was, I wore like oversized men's t-shirts and the most squashing sports bras I could find to basically deny my femininity as much as possible because I had to be the cool girl. And, if somebody told a raunchy joke, I'd have to tell a raunchier one because otherwise I didn't have a sense of humor and I didn't really belong there. And it's like, no, I absolutely belong here. And if I have to do this to prove to you that I belong here, that is what I'm going to do because I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
Wasn't ideal, but I survived it. And hopefully, and part of my reason for wanting to be teaching is I like to think that my cohort and I made it easier for women in the industry to not have to do this kind of bullshit. I mean, it's definitely better. You're not having to constantly be barraged with images of scantily clad women. Mm-hmm. Certainly not in your workspace. But it's still, there's still a very diehard crowd who that is, first-person shooters are the only thing that's legitimate, and that's the only way it's ever going to be.
Okay, so you were... You're working in the gaming industry. You have a different perspective than a lot of the people around you. At what point did you start to consciously think about wanting to make games differently? Was it from the beginning?
Because
this has been important to you more recently, certainly.
Yeah. So at the beginning, my first couple of experiences were great because they were very egalitarian and they were not that sort of game. They were adventure games, things like that, which I really enjoy adventure games. I know not everybody does, but I do. And I enjoy solving puzzles. So I was working there for a while. And then as I got into more having to take jobs in more mainstream things, I started realizing how much that was chafing at me and started looking for places where I could be doing something that felt better.
Uh-huh. Okay.
I would say the place that really turned around was Turbine Entertainment. And I was working on Asheron's Call, which was the third commercially viable MMO.
Oh.
And unlike the other MMOs, 54% of our players were women.
Wow. Why?
Unheard of. Why? Because you had normal clothing and normal avatars, and you didn't have a brass bikini that you're fighting in where anybody who wants to can spear you in the ribs.
That's a good reason. That'll do. And was that like an awakening moment for you?
Yeah, definitely. I remember very distinctly the first time that I was in the ladies' room and there was another woman in the ladies' room. It was shocking. Because you always had a line of men down the hall, which of course is the obverse of what you tend to see.
Right. Most ladies' rooms.
But there's another person in this room with me? Oh my God, what has happened? So it was gratifying to see, even if it was glacial, that tide change coming in. We all just keep fighting for it, and it's happening. I mean, you're getting a lot more studios where there are women who are leading the studio or who are much more involved in the product decisions. And I have to say, it kind of sucked at the time, but I think it was worth it if that was what we got out of it.
Can I hear briefly about you making games for girls?
Yeah.
And then we'll circle back around.
Okay, cool. So
to who else you're making games for.
So I I've worked in children's games a couple of times. I worked on Toontown, which was an immensely popular MMO for kids. I worked on Pirates of the Caribbean, which was for tweens.
Can you actually just say what an MMO is for those?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that's
gamers?
a massively multiplayer online game. The G is not usually said. So these are games like WoW that
World
have
of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft that have huge populations. More than 100,000 players simultaneously.
Okay,
it's
cool.
They're big. They're big games.
Yeah.
But I also started spending more time looking at kids and seeing the evidence of the difference between girls 6 to 9 and girls 10 and up. 6 to 9, these girls are indomitable, invincible, unafraid of anything. If I had an army of them, I could take over the world, no problem, because they don't understand you can't. They don't hear it. It's just not part of their package. They hit 10 or so. Obviously, it varies by individual situations. They get hit with all of these media images of how they should smell like daisies all the time, or and never laugh out loud, or whatever. And then there's societal norms like that as well, and then there's parental issues, and there's peer pressure, and now you have social media, which has taken the looks and appearance thing to a whole new level. So I noticed that their self-esteem started taking a huge hit, and their belief in being able to do things themselves went down dramatically. So I've been working on studying positive psychology so that I can create game experiences that, using those methodologies, provide a game experience where girls can experience things that are going to be happening to them outside of the game, but in a very safe sort of way.
Like what kinds of things?
Like having a crush on somebody, or, your best friend tells your secret to somebody else. These sorts of things that are happening all the time there. Or, so-and-so likes you,
Sure.
whatever, has a crush.
Yeah. So social dynamics.
Yeah.
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 Cool.
And that can all be done. Games are really good at teaching people things. It is one of the things they do best. So if I can teach them how to handle these situations in a very safe environment, low-stakes environment, then they're better equipped to deal with it outside.
How long have you been doing that?
I started thinking about this about 2 years ago.
Just pretty recently? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
You've been thinking about games for parrots for longer.
Yes.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll hear how Patricia realized she could play games with Buster. Like, they could both play, because they both understood the rules. The stick game is coming up. Stick around. Support for Interstates comes from Mallard Grodner Attorneys, providing legal services to clients and the community. Mallard Grodner Attorneys, understanding, expertise, results. Bloomington and Indianapolis. On the web at lawmg.com.
So I'd always done some sorts of games, as evidenced by the tug of war debacle. But I don't even know how it started, honestly, because it's now so ingrained in our relationship. But you remember the scene in Indiana Jones where Indy's just been battling all these guys, and then this dude comes out with a turban and a scimitar and does this crazy thing with the sword?
Right.
Okay, Buster does that, but with a popsicle stick or a tongue depressor. So I hand it to him, and it goes like under his wing and then back over and down the side of his neck and then back over the other way, and they'll go down his tail, and he'll flick it up and catch it. Okay, so yeah, craziness with the stick. The game, I call it the stick game. I don't know what he calls it, but I call it the stick game. So I hand him a stick, and he does his moves, and at some point, he drops it. Now, my job is to catch it before it hits the floor. His job is to fake me out. We play to 7 points. I announce the score at the end of every turn, and I also announce when it's game point. This was just me, games person. Again, it's like, oh, you need these sorts of parameters. So I got home from work one day, and Buster had been by himself all day, and this was a relatively new situation for us where it was just the two of us. And you know those days when you get home and you say to yourself, I just want to be fed and be entertained. I don't want to make food. I don't want to create entertainment. I just want it served to me.
Yes.
And that's how I felt that day when I got home. And I see him, and I know he's been there all day by himself. And so I was guilted into playing the stick game with him. And I thought, oh, well, we'll play one round of the stick game, and he'll feel better, and we can just find food. Yeah. So so I hand him the popsicle stick, and he is creaming me. Like, I'm barely moving my hands to try to catch it because I have so little energy. So it's 6-0. I'm like, okay, 6-0. And I'm thinking to myself, yes, almost done, almost done. And he took it and made one small move, and it basically fell into my outstretched hand. Now, because I was so into the experience at the moment, I really didn't think about that more than, oh, I've got a point. It's not totally over. And I pepped up.
Huh.
And I handed him the stick again. And the second time he did like 2 moves, and I had to move my hand a fraction of an inch to get it. And that was when the penny dropped. I was like, oh, you actually understand these things about the game that I just do as a matter of form. You understand that if it's game point and you're that far ahead, that I will stop playing.
The game is over.
Exactly. And that's where it started. I was like, oh, you understand something about games that most game designers do not understand about games, which is if someone is not having fun, they will not keep playing, which is actually pretty cool.
That's very cool.
And it was one of the days where I was like, and I keep you in a cage. Yeah, that something about that's just not right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, then I started thinking about it more. It's like, I mean, I have to say, it's almost inevitable that these two things in my life would finally, have their Venn diagrams overlap one another, because they're both huge driving forces in my life. So,
okay, so that in and of itself is amazing. And now you're working on actually designing like computer games.
Yeah,
for parrots.
I actually, we have my company, which is Parrot Concepts. We have 6 different apps out on both app stores. The first few things that we've produced are really more digital experiences to help get parrots comfortable with using tablets or phones.
I see. They're maybe not quite as immediately drawn to it as 2-year-olds.
Yeah, they're not. Well, I wouldn't call them games per se. Like,
sure. I just mean they're not as drawn to tablets or screens as humans.
No. You have to kind of like get over a hump with them about it. Okay. I mean, and you can. There are plenty of things that I've seen him be interested in, like trying to catch a dot on a screen kind of thing.
Okay, sure.
But the ones that we've designed are mostly very basic. For instance, there's a very common behavioral training tool, yes, no. And it's like a red thing and a green thing. If it's yes, you choose the green thing. If it's no, you choose the red thing. So we did a digital version of that has different formats depending on how you want to do it. But then the first game actually that we came out with is Nutcracker, which has photos of nuts in their original state on a screen. And when you tap on them, the nut breaks open, so you see what the inside looks like. And it happens to be me saying the name of the nut.
Can I ask, what was the motivation for digital games with parrots?
If you've ever been in a zoo and seen a gorilla like in a corner, just rocking back and forth, like it's unhappy for everyone involved. Yeah. And if you can give them something that they can do that's rewarding as an activity, much better.
Right.
And believe me, parrots are the same way because people get them. They don't understand how much attention they need, how much time they need. So one thing about these digital experiences is it gives you a chance to do something with your bird that you also might find interesting in some way or be motivated to do. Mm-hmm. But also you can set it up so the bird can do it on their own if they want to.
Just like a toddler when you have to cook dinner.
Exactly. And they're getting enrichment out of it.
Right.
Which is having their brain stimulated is super important for these guys because when they get really bored, they start plucking out their feathers or actually mutilating themselves. It's depressed birds are not fun.
And that's not an uncommon situation, I think, right?
No. I had 2 spinal surgeries and I was basically in bed for the better part of 1.5 years. So I wasn't spending the time with him that I could have or should have. And so he started plucking his legs. Wow. And now he has little naked chicken legs, which will never grow back.
Wow.
Yeah, if you do something, if you like consistently pluck it out enough, it stops growing.
Huh. Very interesting. Okay.
Yes. Eliminating that is something I would love.
For Buster and beyond.
Yes. Yes. There are plenty of birds out there who need this kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
To get engaged. And I mean, I was thinking also about enrichment activities, like creating foraging toys and so on. It's like, we could do a lot with digital. Okay, so here's the one thing about going digital with these guys. The screens that we use are not pressure sensitive. Virtually every one of them is capacitive in nature.
Capacitive means
like skin contact.
Right, the little bit of electrical signal.
Right. Exactly. Which is why water droplets hitting your phone can make it do weird things.
Yeah.
Because they're also capacitive.
Right.
So the thing is with birds is their inclination is to have something with their beak.
Uh-huh.
So I had to figure out, how do I get him to use his tongue, which is capacitive, instead of his beak, which isn't.
How did you figure that out?
I put almond butter on a tablet and licked it off.
You licked it off?
Yeah. To show him what he needed to do. Because I'm that kind of crazy. It's like, I will demonstrate for you and see if you figured this out. And he did. I don't know how other people are getting their birds to do this, but that worked really well for me. So.
And now he touches the screen with his tongue.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does he enjoy the games?
He does. So some of them not so much. We had just gotten Nutcracker, like a new version of it, and Buster was not with me. He was with my sister, and I was like, "Oh, do me a favor, like try out this game with him," because I wanted to see what it's like when someone else is holding the device and like how generalizable that is. And
right.
Like,
so it's not just about you and your relationship.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and we have beta testers who are experiencing this, but it was like, oh, if it's coming from somebody else, what's that like?
Yeah.
So she pulled up Nutcracker, which is very definitely my voice. And like he was scared of the phone at first and he ran away and then he came back and then he touched one, heard my voice and ran to the other side of the cage. And every time she tried to do it with him from that point on, he would just refuse. Because he was used to hearing my voice coming out of a phone, but he was used to seeing me when that was happening.
Like your picture on the phone, like you're FaceTiming with him?
Yeah, I had FaceTimed with him.
That would also not have occurred to me as someone who is not a parrot owner.
It made him happy. So he was staying with friends of mine for about 4 months because I was living in a place where I couldn't have him. And they were very strong animal advocates. And they offered, and I was like, yes, that would be great, so that he has that contact. And what would end up happening was a fascinating kind of transference where because he could see me and he could hear my voice, he would let this guy pet him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, the comfort of you being there.
Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, because I expect this to go with this experience, and there it is. And he never tried to bite my friend over it, which is amazing because he hates men. So, so weird. But yeah.
Huh.
Yeah.
Amazing.
That's how that went.
So I'm curious to just think together a little bit more about games and animals in a more general sense. I mean, on some level, we absolutely, I think, culturally are familiar with playing games with animals. Like my cat loves to play fetch. He's likes to play fetch more than our dog does. So we're used to this to a certain degree. But you've probably thought about it more deeply than most of us.
Indeed. I'm because you said that about fetch, my mother ended up adopting an abused dog at one point. And the dog did not play any games, had never been played with. So if you're wondering about me and the almond butter on the tablet, just know that I remember my mother on all fours taking a ball of socks, throwing them, and then going out after them and picking them up in her mouth and bringing them back. So maybe that's why I did it, but obviously the apple does not fall far from the tree, and we will do crazy things to make those in our lives happy. Sorry.
That's a beautiful image.
It's one I'll never forget. It's just
and it worked.
Oh yeah. He was never like super into it, but but it worked.
Yeah.
So there's actually there are a number of groups around who are doing animal computer interface things. There's a group at the Luddite school who are doing this. And in fact, I just got introduced into that community a little more than a month ago. So there's like something called interspecies communication or conversations. It's a group that tries to foster the idea of there are all sorts of things that we can communicate with and enrich and provide varied experiences for different creatures. There's somebody at the Luddite School who is working with chickens and puts them in a virtual, like a VR box, basically, to have their reactions to the visuals.
Wow.
Yeah. So there's a lot of really interesting things going on, and it's actually really nice for me to have found my tribe. None of them look at me like I'm crazy.
Right.
So it is something that's being thought about all across the world, because we understand that technology is a tool. And if we can use this tool to enrich the lives of these creatures, whether they're pets or they're in zoos or they're in a conservation setting, being able to address that is wonderful. And when I started this, I thought to myself, this could be generalizable to other species, not the same software, but this concept and getting those things done. So, yeah.
Right, because it's solving a problem that wouldn't necessarily be there if it weren't for us in the first place.
Indeed. And we have some thoughts about that. And when I say we, I mean my business partner and I.
Okay.
So her name is Virginia Wright. She is our tech and IT person.
Okay.
And she is fabulous. But we have a shared vision that we really do not believe people should be keeping parrots. It's not right. It's just not right. They should be doing their own thing out in the world.
How long did it take you to come to that as someone who has a parrot?
I've certainly known it for about 10 years, where I'm convinced. So I've had a couple of incidents that have kind of driven that point home for me. I was married, and Buster didn't like my husband, and he was a narcissist, so he couldn't deal with that. So he decided he was going to get his own cockatoo because he wanted to have a cool bird like him.
Oh, wow.
And I explained at great length how irresponsible this was because of how long they live. Yeah, we didn't discuss that part.
No, that's pretty essential.
When I was 29 and they said, 40 to 60 years, I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that. That's like my mom's. No. When you're 29, you cannot possibly understand what 40 years means. You can't. It's impossible. Yeah. You can guess. You can extrapolate. No, you cannot know. And they've upped the limit from 40 to 60 to 50 to 70 for my specific cockatoo. It's like, oh, damn. Because I calculated we'd have like 50-50 shot on this, and I think you're going to outlive me now.
Oh, my God.
And I will never be rid of you.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah. There's
an awakening, rude awakening.
Yeah. So we had this young cockatoo. It's very large and very smart. And he'd had him about 3 months. And I walked from the kitchen into the room, the family room, which is where the birds were. And he looked at me from inside his cage and he said, "Hi, Patricia." I never heard him trying to sound this out. I never heard him practicing. Just one and done. Like, I walked in, he said, "Hi, Patricia." And I was like, Patricia is not an easy thing to say.
Yeah.
Even for human beings. Like, it's not the easiest name in the world. And that he picked up on what the context was and who I was and how I was identified. And I looked at him and I said, "Yeah, we keep you in a cage."
That's not right.
No, not right. It's just not cool. But Virginia and I are very pragmatic, and we know that we can't end the pet trade. We can't stop people breeding birds, but we can do something to help this situation a bit. In all of the animals in animal husbandry, the most often surrendered is the cockatoo. Now, there are over 20 varieties of cockatoo. The one that's most often surrendered, mine, the Goffin's cockatoo. Why? Because they're pains in the butt because they're too damn smart.
Right.
The behaviorist I worked with said, "Yeah, I really respect you for having a Goffin's for nearly 30 years, because this was a few years ago." She said, "I had a Goffin's for a while. I could not deal with it. I had to rehome it." She's like, "It says something about you that you've been able to do this for this long."
Yeah.
Maybe not all great, but yeah. Yeah.
What do you hope for the company?
Okay, so neither of us care whether it makes money, really. We have 6 apps
It
out
might
there.
be good video games for parents.
So of the 6,
Important.
yes,
Maybe not the biggest market.
yes. So although 7.5 million in the U.S.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, bigger market than I realized.
See?
Yeah. Okay.
And it's 34.5 million households, I believe.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. Okay. That's
So-
a totally legitimately substantial market that you
Okay,
could
cool.
make money.
All right. Yay. We're cooped on that one. So currently, of the 6 apps that we have out there, only 2 are paid. One I think is 99 cents, and the others I think $3.99. The one that's $3.99 has original artwork, and we want to pay the artist who did it.
Cool.
And the other one, it's our first foray into a game, as opposed to just kind of like words for birds. You know, you tap on the thing, you learn the word. Okay,
Yeah.
or the yes/no thing. But and there's 2. There's Touch Gallery, the one that the artist did, which it's kind of like a coloring book, except it's original art, and they're not bright in kid color kind of tones, but they look like stained glass basically. And we have a parrotlet in our test group. Parrotlets are teensy. They're way smaller than parakeets, like half the size of a parakeet. And we have one tester who loves this game to death. And he will do the pattern, and then he'll stand there and just look at it in art appreciation. And if his owner is out of the room and he wants to do, he knows how to like get it started and sit there and start doing that, and then sit there and admire his handiwork, which I think is fabulous.
So,
hopefully, the business makes money that we could leave to our taking care of our birds, but it's not really our objective. We want to make things better.
right. And so just, maybe I think for our last thing, like what would that look like if the company really achieved what your dreams for it
Well,
are?
Okay. Sorry, I have to take a moment to go into blue sky because
Yeah,
it's not where I
hey.
live these days.
Sure.
Ideally, half the parrot owners out there would at least download one of our free apps and engage with it and learn that this is another avenue of dealing with this situation. The idea that other disciplines can look at this and say, oh, this is meaningful, these are meaningful interactions, would be fabulous. So,
Nice.
yeah,
Awesome.
it's pretty fun. Kind of crazy, but you got to figure it. The first people over the wall are always a little crazy.
It's true. It's true. Awesome. This seems great. This is great. Patricia, thank you so much.
Oh, you are so welcome.
It was so great that we turned off the mics and kept talking about the role of games in our lives. And I realized I should turn the mics back on. So here's 3 minutes of Patricia Pizer on types of play and what it's all for.
Human beings are creatures of play. It's very unfortunate that because of the way this country was formed and the Protestant work ethic, that we tend to believe that when you're playing, you're wasting time, which is anything but the truth. When you're playing, you're practicing things. And you're having certain types of experience. For instance, it might be hard fun where you're having to do something and you keep failing and you keep failing, but then you know if you just get incrementally better, you can do it. And then you have this fabulous feeling of fiero, which is like when you see somebody put their fists in the air or pump their fist, that's that feeling. Like, yes,
Right.
I finally conquered this.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easy fun. Like, perfect example of easy fun, bubble wrap. You don't have to do anything special with bubble. It's just fun. It's just really easy fun. You don't have to learn anything. You just pop them and it's fun.
Is there like a practicing quality to that too?
There is, but it's actually, it's not so much practicing as a small burst of joy. So, which is why I'm like, games fill a lot of different types of things.
Right.
There's also people fun, which is you're playing a game with someone else or a lot of somebody else's.
Yeah.
So you have this social connection situation going on, which is internally gratifying, and you're also having this other experience outside. Then there's another category, serious fun. So, for instance, I use Duolingo every day. And that is a perfect example of serious fun because I am trying to learn a language and the app has been so gamified, which I think is awesome. And I find it fascinating that, where other media are learning from games finally.
Right.
So gamification, yeah. But it's still something that I'm doing to enrich myself in some way.
Right.
And it could be that you're enriching yourself. It could be you're enriching others. But there are a lot of different types of play, and we as a society frown upon play. We frown upon having fun that way. I mean, if you go to watch a game, like a sports game, okay, that's okay. That's okay.
Exactly.
But if you're playing a video game, everybody thinks you're wasting your time, which is not true. A lot of early video games helped people become better readers. There were kids who were learning to read by playing text adventures and learning how to navigate and things like that. And math skills, there were all sorts of games at the time that helped you with your math skills. And it wasn't a math game. It was just you needed to know math to be able to proceed through the game. So don't knock it if you play it crossword puzzles or the Wordle or whatever it is that gets you thinking in a different way is great because we need to think differently to actually innovate and to do great things.
And that's our show. Let us know what it got you thinking about. Send us an email or a voice memo through the contact tab on our website, wfiu.org/interstates, or get in touch on Facebook or Instagram. Interstates is produced and edited by me, Alex Chambers. Our associate producer is Dom Hyab. Our master of social media is Jillian Blackburn. We get support from Eobon Binder, Natalie Ingalls, Louanne Johnson, Sam Schemenauer, Peyton Whaley, Lisa Robin Young, and Kate Young. Our executive producer is Eric Bolstridge. Our theme song is by Amy Olsner and Justin Vollmer. We have additional music from the artists at Universal Production Music. A couple other shout-outs. First to Natalie Ingalls for our title, and then especially to Lydia Norton and Betsy Leja. Their interview with Patricia on the IU Media School's I'm No Expert podcast is how I found out about her love of parrots and parrot games. We don't have any found sound this week. We ran out. No more sound. So go turn this off. Unplug. Listen to the birds in the trees. Maybe they're parrots. Probably not. Until next week, I'm Alex Chambers. Thanks as always for listening.
Top of the hunter's moon, see airplanes like stars slinging, subliminal, we make the round sound soon. A dead end for hand ringing.
Hoosier Spirits is a new documentary from WTIU and Indiana Public Media that explores Indiana's deep distilling roots and visits distilleries across the state to get a glimpse at the future of Hoosier Spirits. Learn more, check out a map of Indiana distilleries, and get the recipe for our exclusive cocktail at WTIU.org/Hoosier Spirits.